Welcome, everyone, to Mindset Monday. I'm Denise, Zack, your host. Thank you so much for being here. We've got an amazing episode today. It is my 20th podcast episode, and I'm super excited for today's guest. For those of you who don't know what Mindset Monday is, it is a podcast that kind of gets into those 6 inches in between your ears, helping us to kind of learn a little bit about what people are dealing with on a daily basis and how they still move forward and push forward, and how their mentality impacts their well-being, but also many times how the mentality can cause us our own inner struggle and challenges in life. And so I really like to talk to my guests about what's going on in their world and in their life, and how they are moving forward using their mindset and what that does for them on a daily basis. This podcast is part of the Game Plan U podcast series, and Game Plan U is an organization that brings together founders of sports tech startups, early stage, our investors and mentors and career seekers. We are a community that supports one another. We innovate, we build, we connect with one another, we partner with one another. And if you want to learn more about the Game Plan U community, if you want to join and be a part of that, it is www.gameplanu.org. I want to dive into introducing my guest today because I'm just so excited that he's here, that he took the time to be here today. Malcolm Lemmons, a former pro basketball player, is here today. He is a two-time author. He is the founder and CEO of Athletes Unheard. He's just doing amazing things for people in the industry. He didn't just become an athlete and then, rest on his laurels with that. He created an entire platform beyond his professional career, which can be a very difficult thing for someone to do in general, to pivot like that and to be successful beyond your first career, right? But he's done such amazing things in the world and for people, providing information, providing support, providing community around so many important topics that impact our world today. Lord knows 2020 has been a difficult year for all of us. And Malcolm is very open and honest about how his platform has been developed out of some of those struggles. And so I'm just excited to have him here. And without further ado, I'm going to bring him on today. Hey, Malcolm, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Denise. Thank you for that amazing introduction.
Well, thank you for being here. I really, really am grateful for you and all that you're doing. I want to talk a little bit about, obviously you're this professional athlete. You've played in the game. You have done such awesome things. And then you were able to transition, which is such a difficult thing. So maybe tell us a little bit about your career and what you were doing, how you got, into being a professional athlete, and where you come from just in your life, that and what kind of a mindset you had that allowed you to do that, because it is not easy to become a professional athlete.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I was like every other kid, growing up with the dream, and my entire life, the only thing I wanted to be was a professional athlete. So I think starting from maybe fifth grade, I chased that throughout high school. I was very fortunate to go to a highly prestigious high school in Washington, D.C. called Gonzaga, and had the opportunity to compete with guys such as Victor Oladipo, who plays with the Rockets, Quinn Cook plays with the Lakers. I went to school with Tyler Thornton, who's played at Duke, Kyrie Irving. So just an extremely high level of basketball, and that, that opportunity allowed me to get a lot of exposure, and then, blessed enough to get a Division I scholarship to Niagara University. Went through a lot of ups and downs there, but learned a ton, and, ultimately ended up transferring my senior year to a school called Cal State San Marcos. Kind of just took a leap of faith and went out to San Diego. So complete weather change. But, I
A little
actually
bit.
ended up, yeah. But I ended up having the best year I ever had playing basketball. I was an All-American, Defensive Player of the Year. So won a lot of awards and just had an incredible season. And that was really what gave me the opportunity to go overseas and play professional basketball for a couple of years, and had more ups and downs over there, but invaluable, experience, just getting paid to do something you love, achieving your lifelong dream, and just getting an opportunity to travel and experience a different culture. So, it was definitely, the highlight of my life, but, every athlete has to walk away from the game one day. And I walked away in 2017 and felt like my purpose was bigger and that I wanted to make a difference in a different way. So
That's amazing. And not only did you just walk away from, not that you walked away, but you left, your professional athlete stature in 2017. You published a book in the same year. How did that even come about? I think it's something crazy, like 3% of the population of the world actually ever publishes or writes a book. And so for you to have been in this world where, I'm sure people weren't talking about becoming an author, when
right.
you're playing pro ball, how did that come about? How did the book come about?
Well, I'll start by saying that I had no aspirations to become an author. I never even, writing wasn't something that even crossed my radar. But I
Yeah.
look back on my life, it was something that I did for therapy. I think that whenever I was going through something in life, I would write just as a means of trying to express myself because I was never the most open person or very talkative. So it
Hmm.
was my outlet, and I didn't notice that until my second year playing overseas. And I got over there in the middle of the season. We had about a month-long break, and we weren't playing any games. So just practicing for like an hour or two a day. And I would come back to my room, small loft outside of Tokyo, and I would just sit there because I had so much time on my hands, and I didn't even have Wi-Fi, so I just had a computer in front of me. And up until that point, my professional basketball career had been very unstable. A lot of back and forth from overseas, coming back home, working jobs that I hated. And so I knew that this lifestyle wasn't something I wanted to continue doing. And I wanted to figure out what my life was going to look like going forward.
Hmm.
So that just led me to a point of reflection. And I started to write because of having so much time on my hands. And to really make a long story short, I started to share that content, and people would tell me how inspiring my story was, how much I had to go through to become a professional athlete. And so that's what really led me to publishing that book, because I felt like I'd be doing an injustice to the next generation of athletes coming up behind me if I didn't tell my story, if I didn't talk about the reality of chasing a dream as ambitious as wanting to become a professional athlete, and some of the pitfalls and the struggles that comes along with that. So that's what led me to writing Lessons from the Game, and really jumpstarting that transition, because I don't know if I would have really had a plan for what my future was going to look like if I didn't publish that book. It opened up a lot of doors for me. So.
Yeah, amazing. And it's interesting because I think that, I worked with so many college students, in their senior year thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I don't know how many times I've tried to have the discussion that the path will unfold the way it unfolds based on what you're dealing with at the time.
Right.
And things just sort of, they always work out, generally, but you do have to have some determination. You do have to have some drive to push yourself, to learn, to grow, to connect, and all of that. And you talk about in your first book, you talk about determination, kind of being that underdog, coming from a tough neighborhood, the sacrifices that you've had to make, and the losses that you had along the way, and how those really kind of molded you into the person that you are today, and all that sacrifice that comes along with that. Can you talk a little bit about that today? Because I just think that's such an important thing for people to hear.
Yeah, I think that when you're trying to, as I said, achieve something as ambitious as becoming a professional athlete, less than 2% of athletes, in the world have that opportunity. I think it inherently comes with, sacrificing a lot, such as your time. And I look back in high school, like when other kids were going to parties and hanging out, I was in the gym, where I had to stay home and wake up and go to practice at 5, 6 in the morning. So just little things like that, and just being consistent with your routine, knowing that if this is something you really want, you have to put in the time, put in the energy, put in the effort every single day, and that someone else in this country, in the world, is out there trying to take your spot. So just having that mentality, that mindset, and carrying that every single day as an athlete, and even into life after sports, I think is really important to understand, and that's what ultimately allowed me to achieve that goal. Because I tell people, I don't think I was the best player on any basketball team I played for past middle school. I wasn't never the most talented. I was never the most athletic or the strongest or the fastest. But I was willing to work hard. I was willing to do things other athletes weren't,
Mm.
willing to do. And that's what allowed me to become a professional athlete more than anything else.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we've talked about that so much on within the Game Plan U community. Just with we've had interns come on that are student athletes, and they've talked openly about maybe not being the fastest, maybe not being the best person on the team, but that they just never gave up.
Mm-hmm.
That there's something inside of them, a fire, a passion, something that kind of just keeps them going, which I
Right.
think you're speaking to right now. But I want to, you talked before about kind of these ups and downs, right? Ups and downs of just life in general, ups and downs of being a professional athlete. But then you also mentioned that you weren't someone who talked a lot. You didn't really express yourself a lot. And I think that, when you talk about being an athlete, when you talk about being successful, when you talk about being strong and driven, there isn't time or space for downs and being low and showing weakness, quote unquote.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about how that is a detriment, I think, in many ways to our athletes coming up, the ranks right now and trying to pursue their world, their place in the professional world.
Yeah, it's that next play mentality, right? And I think, athletes growing up, we're taught to be mentally tough. We're taught to stick it out and to not show any weakness or emotions. And I think that can aid a lot of athletes in terms of having tunnel vision and just the extreme focus on just getting the job done. But I think when it comes to an athlete's development as an individual, just being a human being, no one makes it through life alone or we have emotions, we have feelings, we all experience these things as people. And so I think not being able to express that or not creating a culture that allows athletes to do that, it affects them mentally when they're done playing sports, and they carry over that mentality of not showing any weakness, but that's not human like. And so I definitely think it's a huge issue that's largely perpetrated by coaches and the parents of athletes. So I think that's something that is starting to change, I feel like, but there just needs to be more conversations and safe spaces and outlets to where athletes can talk about the things they're going through, that because it doesn't make them weak or any less capable of being a successful athlete by expressing themselves. And so we have to create spaces and really just change the culture of what being transparent and vulnerable means. And I think that is actually the most powerful people are the most vulnerable. It's showing athletes that it's okay to not be okay. We all go through things in life, and talking about it doesn't make you a less than capable athlete.
Yeah, and I always have this little thing that I talk about. The word courage is the core is heart. So courage means of the heart and being able to express what's heavy on your heart. That's the definition of courage, And so I 150% agree with you on that. I just think it's so important, which leads me to my next question about Athletes Unheard, right? This isn't about getting people out in the spotlight. This isn't, necessarily about, highlighting athletes so that they can become pro. It's about hearing their voice and the struggles that they have and the realness of what's going on in our world today. Can you talk about that platform, what it is, why you developed it, and what you're doing with it?
Yeah. So I would say that Athletes Unheard is really a accumulation of everything that I've personally gone through in my life, but also what I've seen with other athletes during this past year. Looking back, since I was a kid, talking about the culture of sports, and especially within the Black community and being a Black male, like mental health is something that's just not talked about at all. And I realized that going through certain things in my life, certain experiences that I had growing up, how those things have manifested into negative ways as I'm becoming an adult, me lashing out or being angry or not just knowing how to deal with certain emotions that I'm feeling. And that combined with, everything we've gone through as a country, but also globally during 2020, and seeing heightened levels of depression, anxiety, other mental health issues with athletes, and my own personal struggles being exacerbated. I think in September of 2020, I started to experience extreme panic attacks, and I had like 3 in a span of like 2 weeks. And when one of them, I had to actually go to the hospital to see if there was something else going on. And
Yeah.
going through that and not really seeing many outlets or spaces to where we're having these conversations openly and places to where athletes feel safe talking about their experiences. That's really why I wanted to start Athletes Unheard. And what we're really trying to do is, as I said, create a safe space, create a place where athletes can come and talk and learn and grow and heal and know what mental health is about. And we're really just trying to destigmatize what it means in the athletic community, and allow athletes to understand that this will be increasingly important going forward, and something that you need to take as seriously as you do your physical health.
Absolutely. And you know, I think it's so important that you talk about the cultural aspects of mental health and access to healthcare. You know, I worked on a college campus, which was a pretty diverse college campus for 20 years. And even though the campus was diverse, the amount of people accessing our free services was predominantly white.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't information or trust um, or the tendency to kind of seek out those kinds of services because of the stigma that's attached to them, because of I think many times the lack of knowledge around or around those resources, right, when you're growing up. And so we had to do a lot of outreach. And so I just think that it's so important to change that discussion, which is what you're talking about. Create places where people feel safe, where they feel heard, where they feel like they can talk about these things that are plaguing them, causing them, you know, distress, and not feel like they're going to be judged in the process.
Right, right. And I think that the next generation, Gen Z, is definitely getting it. I think that, you know, with with going through what we've gone through this past year, I mean, the silver lining in it all is that we're understanding that mental health is something that needs to be taken seriously. And we all have it. We all, as I said previously, we all go through ups and downs, but
Yeah.
Being isolated, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with just the trauma, I think we're, as a country, as a culture, we're starting to understand that we need to talk about these things and we need to be open. And I just love to see Gen Z kind of leading that charge and expressing themselves openly and just being as transparent as they possibly can. So I love to see that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the younger generations are much more open and much more aware of the impact that issues going on in the world have on them personally, but also just have on our society in general. And they're just a lot more informed and willing to take those risks that maybe other generations weren't, because the messages were different. And I think people like you, you know, and other organizations, other athletes, other professionals in the world and CEOs are paying more attention to the mental well-being of athletes, but also, you know, just employees and people in general. So I do think that there is that change that's happening. You know, you talk about on your website and your next the next book that came out this past July. I'm gonna put the names of your books up, but you know, you talk about a lot of different aspects and things that can impact people, you know, beyond the game, that can impact athletes beyond the game. And it's not all about mental health. Our society and what's going on in our world impact mental health. But you talk specifically about things like name, image, and likeness, and brand and reputation as an athlete. Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of that, for those athletes that may be watching that are trying to figure out, what do I do with my life once my sports career is over?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, your reputation is everything. You know, the first thing that someone does when they come across your name is they probably Google you. So it's like, what perception are you giving off? What digital footprint are you leaving behind that can help you elevate not only your athletic career, but whatever you want to do in life after sports? And so, Impact Beyond the Game, I really wanted to put that book into the world because I started to see conversations around name, image, and likeness ramping up. And I knew it was just a matter of time. I think with the amount of power and influence that student athletes, not only student athletes, but athletes have in general in this day and age, they just have an incredible opportunity to kind of leverage that reputation, that brand, to create other options and opportunities in and out of sports. And so it's incredibly important to understand just during an athlete's career, when you're an athlete, people want to talk to you. People want to, build relationships with you. You have followers, you have attention. And so it's all about how you're leveraging that to really just create sustainability in life in your career, and just to give yourself more options and opportunities going forward. So it's something that I think every athlete is starting to get nowadays, that we have incredible, role models at the professional level, such as Serena Williams, LeBron James, obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo, just athletes who are doing, incredible things outside of sports during their careers. And they're really setting an example for the next generation to see that you can be an athlete and whatever else. It's not, mutually exclusive. So I think, the future is bright for a lot of athletes, and I'm excited to see what opportunities will come from name, image, and likeness, and how student athletes will be able to leverage their platforms to do other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it definitely, there's that unknown that a lot of athletes have right now, and not knowing what this means for them, not knowing what their rights are, not knowing what their opportunities are. And so to put this book out there, I think is so important to help them understand what their impact can be. Your reputation it precedes you, right? So your brand is who you are when you're in the room. Your reputation is who you are and how you're perceived once you leave the room. And so paying attention to those is super important. And I think what you're talking about is kind of taking a step back and kind of re-examining how you're operating in your world, right? Like looking at what you're doing, how you're doing it, what your options are, what resources you need, and how you can get to where you need to go and where you want to go, which I think is hugely important. And you talk a lot about role models as well. Who was your role model growing up?
I mean, I have to give that credit to my mom. I think that
I
just the
love it.
example that she set for my brother and I, being a single parent, and having to navigate that alone, raising two Black kids in this country. I mean, it's extremely hard to do. And so seeing her work multiple jobs to support us, and just making sacrifices so that we can have a better life and more opportunities. I give all the credit in the world to her to be where I'm at today, and to accomplish what I have. So as much as I would love to get to another athlete, my mom is definitely, she takes that title.
Well, I love it. And you're going to have to show her this.
Right.
She's been many times before, but I love it. As a mom, I think that's important. But when you talk about ultimate sacrifice, right? I mean, she's the person who showed you what determination is and what motivation is, and how to be, a young man. Also, how to, I imagine, which might be different for other cultures. Being a young man in this country, how to protect yourself, how to communicate, how to yourself, which has got to be a whole other level of stress as a parent. And so for her to be able to do that, and to have such an amazing son, I think is awesome. So kudos to mom. We love that. What message do you have for some athlete right now who may be struggling, who's dealing with something difficult? What advice would you give to them today? What can you say to them that help in their journey?
It's a great question. I think that going back to vulnerability and finding power in talking to someone is extremely important in this day and age, when we have athletes who, for the first time, have gone without their sport, or not being able to be around their teammates, and having that cohesiveness, those friendships, and really having to go through that for the first time, and not knowing what to do. I think there's power in finding someone in your life, or finding anyone you can just be open and talk to about what you're experiencing, and how you're dealing with those emotions, is really important for athletes to understand. I look back on my athletic career, and as I said before, mental health wasn't something that was talked about. So whenever I was going through something, I didn't know how to deal with it, and I would revert to writing, which I think is a good tactic. But I would have been much better off if I would have had someone who I could trust and just be open with. And I think that's something we all need to kind of find. And it's especially important for young athletes to understand and to try to find in their lives, I think, in this time period.
Mm. Absolutely, having those role models and those people that you can look up to that can listen and validate what you're going through, what you're struggling with, and offer support, even if there's nothing they just getting the thoughts that are inside your head out, either on paper, which is what you did, or sharing it with someone else who might have had some of the same experiences, or can at least connect with your story and connect with what you're saying, I think is hugely important. I want to thank you so much for being here. Just everything that you're doing is so powerful and so amazing. And I just love your platform. I love you because I love the way that you're paying attention all the things that can impact college athletes in this world today, in our society today, from pandemics to name, image, and likeness to social injustice. All of these things impact athletes in profound ways. And so I want to story and the best. And I want to just get your information up here. If people want to connect with you, I think you said the best way for them to do that is through your, it's coming up a little bit slow right now. Malcolm Lemmons is your